My teenage sister pretended to be 24 online to scam men out of money, so I exposed her to everyone and watched her face the consequences. A year later, someone was using her identity to steal money, and she begged me to believe she was innocent. My sister thought pretending to be a grown woman online would get her fancy things, but she discovered there are serious consequences when you deceive people about who you really are. For context, my sister has been completely obsessed with those rich lifestyle influencers since she turned 15. Because of all the YouTube tutorials she watches, she knows exactly how to contour her face and style her hair to look like she's in her 20s. At 15, she walks around in blazers and pencil skirts, carrying a fake designer bag, acting like she works at a Fortune 500 company. It's insane, because when I was her age, I was still wearing cartoon t-shirts and light-up sneakers, looking like I belonged in elementary school. I once caught her taking selfies in my college textbooks, pretending to study for her MBA finals. She obviously got her phone taken away and lectured about lying, but it only made things worse. About 3 months ago, I noticed luxury items appearing that we definitely couldn't afford. A notification lit up on her phone with a Venmo payment from someone named SugarBear92, which I instantly knew meant trouble. I immediately confronted her about who was sending her money, and she claimed it was her boyfriend from the neighboring district. I demanded to know how old this boyfriend was, and she swore he had just turned 19. She quickly became defensive when I pushed for details and stormed off saying I was jealous of her relationship. I wanted to trust her because recently she'd been getting better grades and helping around the house, so I thought maybe this older boyfriend was actually a positive influence. I couldn't have been more wrong. A week after discovering the Venmo notification, I ended up recognizing him at a Starbucks near downtown. I marched over to him, barely containing my disgust, and said, "Shouldn't you be ashamed of yourself dating a child?" He looked genuinely confused when he glanced up at me and said, "Child? My girlfriend is 24. Hearing him say that number, I immediately grabbed his coffee and threw it in the trash. He jumped up shouting, "What's wrong with you, lady?" I put my hands on my hips and informed him that he was a predator preying on my baby sister. His expression morphed into complete shock like I had just slapped him, and he insisted that the woman he was dating was a marketing consultant. He frantically pulled out his phone and showed me their Instagram messages. He scrolled to the very beginning where she had told him multiple times that she was 24 and even sent a whole fake LinkedIn profile. I gaped at him, feeling sick to my stomach, and he kept repeating that he genuinely believed she was an adult because she talked about client meetings and posted about business conferences. I sighed, realizing my sister was a scammer. I warned him to block her immediately and delete everything before I went straight home. When I arrived, my parents were already tearing through my sister's room. They went into my sister's room, yanked her out of bed, and forced her to log into all her accounts. She sobbed while they yelled louder with each discovered message and transaction log, showing she'd been doing this to multiple men. She wailed, asking for mercy, and insisting that she never actually met any of them in real life. My mom grabbed her laptop and smashed it against the wall, repeatedly screaming that she wasn't getting any electronics until she graduated college. Since she wanted to play adult games, my parents decided she would face adult consequences. Full story on channel, link below. They made her sit down with a calculator and add up every single dollar she had taken from these men. Every Venmo payment, every Cash App transfer, every gift card she had received. My sister's face went pale as the number climbed higher and higher. When she finished calculating, the total came to $8,600. My dad slammed his hand on the table and announced that she would work every penny of that off at Uncle Frank's auto shop starting tomorrow morning at 6 a.m. My sister jumped up from her chair screaming that she couldn't work at a greasy auto shop because it would ruin her skin and nails. My mom grabbed her shoulders and shook her hard, saying she should have thought about that before scamming grown men. My sister tried to run to her room, but my dad blocked the doorway and told her she wasn't leaving their sight until morning. They made her sleep on the couch in the living room while they took shifts, watching her through the night. The next morning, my dad physically dragged her out of bed at 5:30 a.m. while she kicked and screamed. She refused to put on the coveralls Uncle Frank had dropped off, so my mom forcefully dressed her like a toddler. My sister sobbed the entire car ride, begging them to reconsider, but they stayed completely silent. When they arrived at the auto shop, Uncle Frank was already there with his arms crossed, looking angrier than I'd ever seen him. He pointed at a pile of dirty tires and told her to start moving them to the back. My sister stood there frozen until he yelled at her to get moving. She struggled to lift even one tire, and it took her 20 minutes just to move 3 of them. Uncle Frank shook his head and said at this rate, she'd be working there until she turned 30. My parents left her there with strict instructions that she wasn't allowed to leave the property for any reason. I thought that would be the end of it, but I severely underestimated my sister's determination to avoid consequences. Later that day, while I was doing homework, I noticed her old tablet was missing from the drawer where my parents had locked it. I searched everywhere and finally found it hidden behind the toilet tank. When I powered it on, I discovered she had been using the shop's Wi-Fi to message the men she had scammed. She was telling them that her abusive family had stolen her phone and was forcing her to work in dangerous conditions. She claimed they were keeping all the money she had earned and asked if they could help her escape. Most of the men had already blocked her, but one named David actually believed her story. He had started sending money to a secret Cash App account she created using the tablet. I screenshotted everything and immediately drove to the auto shop. When I arrived, Uncle Frank said she was on her lunch break in the back office. I burst through the door and found her video chatting with someone on the tablet. She quickly ended the call and tried to hide the device, but I had already seen everything. I demanded to know how she got the tablet, and she admitted she had stolen cash from Mom's purse to buy a burner phone at the gas station. She used that phone to access her old accounts and retrieve the tablet from home during a fake bathroom emergency. Uncle Frank came in to see what the commotion was about, and his face turned red when he saw the tablet. He called my parents immediately while my sister begged me not to tell them about David. She promised she would delete everything and actually work if I just kept quiet this once. I laughed in her face and told her she had used up all her chances. When my parents arrived, they were beyond furious and confiscated both the tablet and the burner phone. They went through all her messages with David and discovered something even worse. She had given him her cousin Melissa's address, claiming it was where she was staying to hide from her abusive family. David had been sending packages there thinking he was helping her escape. My mom called Melissa immediately to warn her, but Melissa said a young woman had already shown up claiming to be a family friend in trouble. My sister had been going there instead of working at the shop. Melissa was David's cousin and lived about 30 minutes away. She was a kind-hearted woman who worked as a nurse and genuinely thought she was helping someone escape an abusive situation. My sister had been showing up at her apartment during what were supposed to be her work hours, spinning elaborate tales about her controlling family. Melissa had even given her a spare key and let her use the guest bedroom to rest between her escape attempts. My brother was the one who finally figured out something was wrong. He noticed that my sister seemed way too happy and energetic for someone supposedly working brutal manual labor all day. Her hands were still perfectly manicured, and she didn't have a single grease stain on her clothes when she came home. One day, he decided to follow her and watched her take 3 different buses to get to Melissa's apartment complex instead of going to the auto shop. He sat outside for hours taking pictures of her coming and going, looking relaxed and carrying shopping bags. When he confronted her that evening, she completely lost it. She threatened to call the police and claim our family was abusing her. She pulled up her sleeves to show bruises on her arms that she said were from our parents hitting her. My brother immediately noticed the bruises were in weird patterns and realized she had been hitting herself with objects to create evidence. My parents didn't know what to do anymore, so they called their friend Nancy, who worked as a social worker. They explained the entire situation and asked for her help. Nancy agreed to do official wellness checks that my sister couldn't refuse without looking suspicious to the authorities. The first time Nancy showed up, my sister put on an Oscar-worthy performance, crying about how she was being forced to work in unsafe conditions and wasn't allowed to see her friends. Nancy calmly took notes and said she would need to do follow-up visits to ensure my sister's safety. This threw a wrench in my sister's plans because she couldn't predict when Nancy would show up. She started texting Melissa frantically saying that her family had hired a corrupt social worker to stalk her. She convinced Melissa that Nancy was being paid under the table to write false reports. Melissa believed her and started helping my sister hide during the wellness visits. They created an elaborate system where my sister would text a code word and Melissa would claim she wasn't home or would hide my sister in the bathroom. Nancy caught on quickly that something suspicious was happening and started showing up at random times. One day, she arrived at 6 a.m. and caught my sister trying to sneak out the back door. My sister claimed she was just going for a morning jog, but Nancy noted that she was carrying a duffel bag full of clothes. Meanwhile, my brother had been doing his own investigation. He went back to the auto shop during my sister's supposed work hours and found her hiding spot in the employee bathroom. She had stashed the burner phone inside the toilet tank and was using it to communicate with both David and Melissa. He found messages where she was now telling Melissa she needed money for a lawyer to get a restraining order against our family. She claimed we had threatened to kill her if she tried to leave. Melissa had already given her over $2,000, believing she was helping a young woman escape a dangerous situation. My sister was using the money to buy designer clothes and makeup, stashing them at Melissa's apartment. She had created an entire fake life, even making up stories about job interviews she was going on and apartments she was looking at. David was still sending money too, thinking he was helping his girlfriend get back on her feet after escaping her abusive family. My parents finally had enough evidence to confront Melissa directly. They drove to her apartment with my sister's birth certificate, school ID, and recent report cards. When Melissa opened the door, she tried to close it in their faces, but my mom stuck her foot in the doorway. They showed her all the documents proving my sister was only 15 years old. Melissa's face went white as she realized she had been harboring a runaway minor and potentially interfering with custody. She immediately let them in and called for my sister to come out of the bedroom. My sister emerged wearing designer clothes Melissa had bought her, looking like she was ready for a business meeting. When she saw our parents, she tried to run, but my dad blocked the exit. Melissa was shaking as she processed that everything my sister had told her was a lie. She kept saying, but she said she was 24, over and over while staring at the birth certificate. My sister tried one last manipulation, crying and telling Melissa that the documents were fake and our parents were trying to control her. But Melissa had already seen too much evidence and kicked my sister out immediately. She called David right there in front of everyone and explained the situation. David was horrified to learn he had been enabling a 15-year-old runaway and had potentially committed crimes by sending money to a minor without parental permission. With nowhere left to go, my sister tried running to her friend Ashley's house. She showed up at their door crying hysterically and begging to stay the night. Ashley's mom took one look at her and immediately called our parents. She said she wasn't getting involved in whatever drama was happening, but she wasn't harboring a runaway either. My sister realized she had burned every bridge and had no choice but to come home with our parents. On the drive home, she tried one more manipulation tactic. She started fake crying and claimed she had developed a shopping addiction because of low self-esteem. She said she needed therapy and understanding, not punishment. She even suggested checking herself into a treatment facility for shopping addiction. My parents didn't buy it for a second and told her she was going to face real consequences for her actions. They spent the next week contacting every single man she had scammed with proof of her real age and documentation of her lies. They got written statements from each one detailing how she had deceived them and how much money she had taken. Some of the men were considering pressing charges, but my parents convinced them not to by promising full restitution. They printed out every statement and made my sister read them all to understand the harm she had caused. Then came the part that really made my sister scream. My parents had her calculate the exact total again, $8,600. They withdrew that exact amount from their savings and made her watch as they donated every single cent to an organization that helps teenage girls get education and job training instead of relying on men for money. My sister had to sit there while they completed the donation in her name, knowing that money could have been hers if she had just been honest. This time, she had to work at the auto shop for real. Uncle Frank installed security cameras in every corner and checked on her every hour. She wasn't allowed to have any devices and had to be in his direct line of sight at all times. He made her do the dirtiest jobs, changing oil, rotating tires, cleaning engines. She came home every day covered in motor oil and grease, her designer dreams completely shattered. She spent 10 long months working 6 days a week to earn back the $8,600 plus an extra $2,000 for the therapy she actually did need, not for shopping addiction, but to understand why she thought lying and scamming people was acceptable. The therapist made her write apology letters to every person she had deceived, including Melissa and David. She had to detail exactly how she had lied and take full responsibility for her actions. By month 8, my sister was so exhausted from actual hard work that something shifted. She stopped complaining about the job and started taking pride in learning real skills. Uncle Frank taught her basic car maintenance, and she discovered she was actually good at diagnostics. She even helped a customer figure out why their check engine light kept coming on when 3 other mechanics couldn't find the problem. The transformation was slow but real. She deleted all her social media accounts voluntarily, saying she couldn't stand looking at the fake lifestyle content anymore. She asked our parents to help her apply for real colleges and started researching business programs, but not the glamorous MBA programs she used to pretend about. She wanted to study business ethics and sustainable practices. She wrote her college essays about learning the value of honest work and how deceiving others ultimately only deceived herself. When she finally paid off the full amount, Uncle Frank offered her a legitimate part-time job at the shop. She accepted and still works there on weekends, saving money for college the honest way. She even teaches other teenagers basic car maintenance, always starting with the story of how she learned the hard way that luxury built on lies will always come crashing down. My parents frame her first real paycheck stub, earned through honest work, right next to her college acceptance letter. The morning after my parents framed her paycheck stub, my sister walked into the kitchen with a spring in her step I hadn't seen in months. She poured herself orange juice and started talking about a community college automotive technology program she'd discovered. My mom smiled cautiously, while my dad nodded approvingly, both still wary after everything we'd been through. That's when the doorbell rang. Standing on our porch was a woman in her 30s wearing an expensive suit and holding a manila envelope. She introduced herself as Alexandra, a private investigator hired by someone named Benjamin, who claimed my sister had defrauded him of $15,000. My parents' faces drained of color as Alexandra explained that Benjamin had evidence of wire transfers, fake investment documents, and promises of business partnerships my sister had made while pretending to be a venture capitalist. My sister dropped her glass, orange juice splattering across the kitchen floor. She swore she didn't know anyone named Benjamin and had never taken that much money from anyone. Alexandra pulled out printed screenshots showing conversations from an encrypted messaging app where someone using my sister's photos had convinced Benjamin to invest in a fake startup. The messages were dated during the time my sister was supposedly working at Uncle Frank's shop. My dad grabbed the papers and studied them carefully. The writing style was different from my sister's usual messages, more sophisticated and business-focused. My sister frantically explained that someone must have stolen her photos and created fake profiles. She begged us to believe her, reminding us how hard she'd worked to change. My mom looked torn between protecting her daughter and fearing we'd been fooled again. Alexandra said Benjamin was prepared to press charges unless he received full restitution within 30 days. She left her business card and warned that this was just a courtesy visit before legal action began. After she left, my sister collapsed on the couch sobbing that she was being framed. She pulled out her work schedule from Uncle Frank's shop, showing she'd been there during the times those messages were sent. My brother immediately started investigating online. He found multiple profiles using my sister's photos on business networking sites, all created recently. Someone had built an entire fake persona, complete with a fabricated work history and endorsements from other fake profiles. The scammer was actively messaging potential victims, promising huge returns on investments in non-existent companies. My parents called Uncle Frank, who confirmed my sister had been at work during the dates in question. He even pulled security footage showing her changing oil and rotating tires at the exact times those messages were being sent. It became clear someone was using her image to run a sophisticated scam operation, likely because her photos were already associated with fake business profiles from her previous schemes. We tried contacting Benjamin through Alexandra, but she said her client wouldn't speak to us directly until the money was returned. My sister was devastated that her past actions had created this situation. She spent hours trying to get the fake profiles taken down, but new ones kept appearing. The scammer had downloaded all her photos from her deleted social media accounts and was creating new identities faster than we could report them. My dad hired a tech-savvy friend named Jamie to trace the fake accounts. Jamie discovered the scammer was using VPNs and anonymous email addresses, making them nearly impossible to track. However, he noticed patterns in the writing that suggested the person knew details about my sister's life that weren't public. They mentioned specific restaurants she'd been to and referenced inside jokes from her old Instagram posts. My sister suddenly remembered giving her login information to someone months ago. During her scamming days, she'd met a girl online named Benji, who claimed to be another young woman pretending to be older for money. They'd bonded over their shared schemes and even exchanged tips. My sister had trusted her enough to share passwords so they could boost each other's fake profiles with endorsements and comments. We tried to find Benji, but discovered that profile had also been fake. The person behind it had been collecting information from vulnerable teenagers, learning their methods and gathering their photos. My brother found similar complaints on scam warning forums from other young people who'd been impersonated after sharing information with Benji. The scammer was specifically targeting people who'd already created fake business personas, using their established false identities to run bigger cons. My parents were at a loss. They couldn't afford another $15,000 payment, having already depleted their savings for the previous restitution. My sister offered to work extra shifts at Uncle Frank's shop, but even working 7 days a week, it would take her years to earn that much. She was terrified of going to jail for something she didn't do, especially when she'd worked so hard to reform. That's when Nancy, the social worker, suggested we file a police report for identity theft. She explained that having official documentation would help prove my sister was a victim this time, not the perpetrator. My parents were hesitant, worried that involving law enforcement might expose my sister's past crimes. Nancy assured them that since restitution had been made and no charges were filed previously, the focus would be on the current identity theft. We went to the police station where my sister had to explain her entire history. The detective taking the report was skeptical at first, clearly thinking this was another scam. My sister broke down crying, pulling out her work schedule, pay stubs, and the therapy completion certificate. She showed him the calluses on her hands from months of manual labor and photos Uncle Frank had taken of her progress learning automotive skills. The detective finally believed her when Jamie showed him the technical analysis of the fake accounts. The IP addresses were from different countries, and the scammer was using sophisticated methods beyond what a 16-year-old would typically know. He took the report, but warned that catching international scammers was extremely difficult. Our best hope was proving my sister's innocence to Benjamin, not catching the actual criminal. Meanwhile, Benjamin had hired a second private investigator who started showing up at our house. This one was more aggressive, taking photos of my sister leaving for work and following her to Uncle Frank's shop. He interviewed our neighbors, asking if they'd seen suspicious activity. Some neighbors who'd heard about my sister's past assumed she was up to her old tricks and told the investigator they wouldn't be surprised if she was still scamming people. The pressure was getting to my sister. She started having panic attacks before work, terrified that Benjamin would show up at the shop and cause a scene. Uncle Frank had to ban the investigator from the property after he tried to question customers about my sister. She couldn't sleep, constantly refreshing her phone to see if new fake profiles had appeared. The scammer was now using her photos on dating sites, romance scamming older men with promises of love and business partnerships. My brother had an idea. He suggested we reach out to the other victims of the Benji scam to see if they'd help us build a case. We found 3 other teenagers who'd been impersonated: Ashley from 2 states away, Min from across the country, and a boy named Benji whose photos were being used to scam women. All of them had similar stories of trusting Benji with information during their own attempted scams, only to find their identities stolen months later. We organized a video call with all the victims. Ashley had already been sued by 2 people and had to prove her innocence in court. Min's parents had hired a lawyer who specialized in cybercrimes. Benji was working with his local police field office because one of his victims was a federal employee. They all agreed to share evidence and support each other's cases. My sister cried with relief, knowing she wasn't alone in this nightmare. Min's lawyer suggested we create a comprehensive timeline showing exactly where my sister was during each scam. We gathered every piece of evidence: work schedules, security footage, therapy appointment records, even gas receipts showing she was driving to work instead of meeting victims. Uncle Frank wrote a detailed letter about her employment, including specific cars she'd worked on during the days in question. The scammer made a mistake. They sent Benjamin a video message using my sister's photos, but with an obvious deepfake voice. Jamie analyzed the video and found metadata showing it was created with a specific app that left digital fingerprints. He traced similar videos to other scams, building a pattern that showed one person or group was behind multiple identity theft cases. This evidence was crucial in showing Benjamin that something bigger was happening. My parents arranged a meeting with Benjamin through his lawyer. They brought boxes of evidence, including the police report, testimonies from other victims, and the technical analysis. Benjamin was a retired engineer who'd lost his wife recently and thought he'd found love and a business opportunity with the fake persona. Seeing my sister in person, clearly a teenager despite her past attempts to look older, made him realize he'd been thoroughly deceived by someone else. Benjamin agreed to drop the potential charges, but still wanted his money back from somewhere. His lawyer suggested suing the platforms that had allowed the fake profiles to flourish despite reports. My sister offered to help with the lawsuit, providing detailed information about how scammers operated on these sites. She spent days writing out every trick she'd learned, every vulnerability in the verification systems, hoping her insider knowledge could help shut down future scams. The other victims' families started a support group that met virtually every week. Parents shared their frustration and fear, while the teenagers worked together to monitor for new fake profiles. My sister became obsessed with helping others avoid her fate, spending hours after work searching for accounts using stolen photos. She created educational content warning people about the signs of business and romance scams, using her own story as a cautionary tale. Uncle Frank noticed my sister was exhausted from working full-time and doing unpaid scam prevention work every evening. He offered to let her reduce her hours, but she refused, saying she needed the money for college and wanted to prove she could handle responsibility. He compromised by teaching her more advanced skills during slow periods, saying if she was going to work herself to death, she might as well learn something valuable. The investigation into the Benji scammer continued for months. The police cybercrimes unit got involved after discovering the operation had stolen millions from victims across the country. They interviewed my sister multiple times, impressed by her detailed knowledge of scam tactics. One agent even suggested she consider a career in cybersecurity after college, saying reformed scammers often made the best defenders against fraud. My sister's college applications were complicated by the ongoing investigation. She had to disclose the identity theft situation, which meant explaining her past. Most schools rejected her immediately, but one state university was intrigued by her story of redemption redemption and her work helping other victims. They offered her conditional acceptance pending completion of her restitution and maintaining clean legal records for 2 years. The stress was affecting our whole family. My parents argued about money, blaming each other for not catching my sister's original schemes sooner. My brother threw himself into his own studies, determined not to cause any additional family drama. I found myself playing mediator, trying to keep everyone from falling apart while dealing with my own anger about how my sister's past actions had created this current crisis. One night, my sister overheard my parents discussing taking out a second mortgage to pay potential legal fees if more victims appeared. She came to me sobbing, saying she couldn't let them ruin their financial future because of her mistakes. She was considering dropping out of high school to work full-time, maybe multiple jobs, to earn money faster. I had to physically stop her from leaving the house at midnight to look for night shift work. The next morning, she asked Uncle Frank if she could learn skills that paid better than basic maintenance. He started teaching her bodywork and painting, which commanded higher wages. She threw herself into learning, practicing on junked cars until her work was flawless. Within a month, she was doing paint jobs that customers specifically requested, earning commission on top of her hourly wage. The Benji scammer must have sensed the investigation closing in because the fake profiles suddenly stopped appearing. The existing ones went dormant, no longer messaging potential victims. This was both a relief and a worry. We had no idea if they were planning something bigger or had simply moved on to new identities. My sister still checked obsessively, terrified she'd wake up to find new victims demanding money. Benjamin's lawsuit against the platforms gained media attention, though my sister's name was kept out of it as a minor. The case highlighted how easy it was for scammers to steal identities and operate with impunity. Several other victims joined the lawsuit, creating a class action that demanded better verification systems and faster responses to reports of fake profiles. My sister provided expert testimony via written statement, detailing exactly how she'd bypassed security measures in her past. The other teenage victims and their families became our unexpected support system. We had monthly in-person meetings at a community center, sharing updates and strategies. Ashley's family drove 3 hours to attend, saying it was worth it to be around people who understood. Min started a private online forum where we could quickly alert each other to new scams using our photos. Benji created automated alerts that notified us whenever our images appeared on new sites. My sister's transformation continued through all this chaos. She no longer wore designer knockoffs or tried to look older. Instead, she embraced looking her age, wearing Uncle Frank's shop t-shirts with pride. She started tutoring other at-risk teenagers, teaching them legitimate ways to earn money online like freelance writing or virtual assistants. The community center let her use a room for free, recognizing the value in keeping kids from falling into scamming. 6 months into the identity theft nightmare, we finally got good news. The police had arrested a group operating out of Eastern Europe who'd been running the Benji scam, among others. They'd stolen millions using hundreds of stolen identities. While it was unlikely any money would be recovered, having the criminals caught meant the fake profiles finally stopped completely. My sister cried with relief for hours. Benjamin formally dropped all claims against my sister after the arrests. He even apologized for the stress he'd caused, saying he understood she was a victim too. He joined our support group, sharing his perspective as someone who'd been scammed to help the teenagers understand the real impact of these crimes. His stories were heartbreaking. He'd been looking for companionship after his wife's death and thought he'd found both love and purpose. With the immediate threat resolved, my sister could focus on finishing high school and preparing for college. She continued working at Uncle Frank's shop, but reduced her hours to have time for studies. Her grades improved dramatically, and her college essay about redemption, identity theft, and finding purpose in helping others was powerful enough that 2 more universities offered her acceptance. The experience had changed our entire family.